In February 2022, the United States did something no empire in history could do. It didn't send troops. It didn't drop bombs. It pressed a button and froze Russia out of the global financial system overnight. $700 billion in Russian assets gone. Major Russian banks cut off from SWIFT, the network that processes international transactions. The world's largest country by landmass, a nuclear superpower, was suddenly unable to conduct basic international business. Russian companies couldn't pay foreign suppliers. Foreign companies couldn't pay Russian sellers. The entire nation was financially quarantined. And here's what should terrify you. This wasn't an act of war. It was routine financial policy. This is the story of the most powerful weapon in the world. Today, the Petrodollar System and the SWIFT network. 2. Mechanisms that give the United States more control over global affairs than any empire in human history. By the end of this video, you'll understand why even China can't escape the dollar's grip. Let's go back to 1974. The United States had a problem. The Vietnam War had drained the treasury. The dollar was losing value, and then came the oil crisis. Arab nations had cut off oil exports. Gas prices quadrupled overnight. Americans were waiting in line for hours just to fill their tanks. President Nixon sent his Treasury Secretary to Saudi Arabia with an offer. Here's the deal they made. Saudi Arabia would sell its oil exclusively in US dollars. Not yen, not marks, not gold, only dollars. In exchange, the United States would provide military protection. Think about what this meant. Every country on Earth needs oil. And suddenly, to buy oil, you needed dollars first. It's like if Apple required everyone to buy iPhones before they could access the internet. You've just created permanent, mandatory demand for your product. Within a few years, every major oil producer followed suit. The Petrodollar System was born. And here's the genius. The US could now print money, and other countries had to accept it because they needed those dollars to buy energy. Japan needs oil? Buy dollars first. Germany needs oil. Buy dollars first. China needs oil. Buy dollars first. This gave America what economists call exorbitant privilege. When the US government spends beyond its means, it exports its inflation to every other country holding dollars. They absorb the cost. But you need to understand the second piece of the puzzle. Here's a question most people never ask. How does money actually move between countries? The answer is SWIFT, the Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. Created in 1973, it's basically a massive messaging system. Think of it as the global Venmo. Except it processes trillions of dollars in transactions every day. Over 11,000 financial institutions in more than 200 countries use SWIFT. If you're not on SWIFT, you're not in the global economy. Period. Now here's where it gets interesting. SWIFT is technically a Belgian company. Neutral, right? Wrong. The United States has de facto control over SWIFT. Because SWIFT processes dollar transactions, the US Treasury can compel SWIFT to cut off any institution or country it wants. Under threat of losing access to the American financial system, SWIFT complies every single time. Financial sanctions are the most powerful non-military weapon ever created. In 2012, the United States wanted to stop Iran's nuclear program. Traditional warfare wasn't an option, so the Treasury Department did something simpler. It told SWIFT, cut off Iranian banks or lose access to US markets. SWIFT cut off Iran overnight. Iran couldn't conduct international trade. The rial lost 2/3 of its value. Here's the absurd part. Iran sits on 9% of the world's oil reserves, but they couldn't sell it effectively because buyers couldn't pay them through normal banking channels. The entire nation was economically suffocated without a single shot being fired. Fast forward to 2022. And Russia, after invading Ukraine, Russia was cut off from SWIFT within days. Russia had prepared for this. They'd built up $630 billion in foreign reserves, a war chest specifically, designed to cushion against sanctions. Didn't matter. Half of those reserves were held in banks in the US and Europe. The US Treasury simply froze them. $630 billion, and Russia couldn't touch a penny. This is the invisible empire. The United States doesn't need to occupy territory, it controls the financial infrastructure, and in 2025, that's more powerful than any army. But here's the question, why do other countries put up with this? As of 2025, 58% of all foreign exchange reserves held by central banks worldwide are in US dollars, not yuan, not euros, not dollars. Here's why they can't stop. First, everyone else is doing it. Second, the dollar is liquid. You can buy and sell massive amounts instantly. Third, the US financial markets are the deepest in the world. Fourth, network effects. Because everyone uses dollars for trade, you need dollars to trade with everyone. The dollar is the common language of international commerce. Switching away from it is like trying to convince the entire world to speak a different language all at once. But there's one challenge the dollar faces that's different from anything in history. China, the world's second largest economy, actively trying to break the dollar's dominance. China has been pushing the yuan as an alternative for over a decade. They've established currency swap agreements with dozens of countries. In 2025, China even convinced Saudi Arabia to accept yuan for some oil purchases, a direct challenge to the Petrodollar System. So how's it going? The yuan represents about 3% of global currency reserves. 3% after 15 years of aggressive promotion. Then there's BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They've been talking about creating an alternative to the dollar for years. In 2024, they expanded to include Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the UAE. Big announcements, bold statements, and yet, as of 2025, they still haven't created a viable alternative. Why? Because they don't trust each other. India and China have border disputes. Russia and China compete for influence. You can't create a reserve currency when the countries behind it are rivals. The dollar works, partly because everyone trusts that the US won't arbitrarily seize their holdings. Well, unless you invade Ukraine. But for normal countries, the US is predictable. Can China make that promise? The answer is complicated. Here's the ultimate advantage of controlling the world's reserve currency. The United States can run deficits that would destroy any other country. In 2024, the US federal debt hit $35 trillion. That's 120% of GDP. When Japan's debt hit this level, they had deflation for 30 years. When Greece hit this level, their economy collapsed. But America, still the largest economy on Earth. Why? Because US debt is denominated in dollars, and the US controls the dollar. When the Federal Reserve prints money, that inflation gets distributed globally. Every country holding dollar reserves absorbs some of the impact. It's like having a credit card with no limit, and everyone else pays part of your bill. This is exorbitant privilege. The United States can fund massive infrastructure projects, maintain military bases in 80 countries, and run social programs simultaneously, all while running huge deficits. Any other country tries this? Currency collapse within months. Unless you're the United States, then the rules are different. So here's what we've learned. The Petrodollar System made the dollar essential for buying energy. The SWIFT network gave the US control over global banking infrastructure. Together, they created something unprecedented. An empire built not on territory, but on financial architecture. The Roman Empire controlled territory, the British Empire controlled sea lanes. The American Empire controls money itself. That's why sanctions are more effective than aircraft carriers. Why? Cutting off SWIFT access is more devastating than a naval blockade. Why Russia, despite being a nuclear superpower, couldn't withstand financial isolation. Will this last forever? Of course not. Every empire falls eventually. China will keep pushing the yuan. BRICS will keep meeting. But in 2025, the dollar's dominance remains unchallenged. 58% of global reserves, 88% of foreign exchange transactions, the pricing currency for virtually all commodities. The invisible empire isn't going anywhere soon, because unseating, the dollar isn't just about creating an alternative, it's about convincing the entire world to trust that alternative more than they trust America. And after 80 years of dollar dominance, that's a harder sell than you might think, even for its enemies.